Today we're going to talk about a recent case that was convicted on September 20th, 2024, and I have to say, it was really crazy and monstrous. And so I just had no choice but to tell you about it. Carly Gregg was born in 2009 in a small town called Flowood, in the state of Mississippi, USA. Her parents' names were Ashley and Kevin Gregg. Carly spent almost all of her childhood with her mother Ashley because her father was almost never around. According to rumors, the girl's biological father was not the best father on earth. At times he abused alcohol and illegal substances and subjected Ashley to various acts of physical aggression. In this regard, the woman even sought help from the police and later broke up with the man. But back to Carly. She was a very smart and bright child and even jumped one grade in her school. When Carly was only 13 years old, she passed a very difficult exam called the ACET, which is taken by most students in the United States shortly before entering the country's highest educational institution. For reference, it should be noted that if a student passes this test perfectly, he or she receives 36 points. That said, only a small percentage of test takers do well on the test, and Carly, despite her young age, was able to score 30. In other words, she was only 6 points away from a perfect score. In fact, the girl had scored the same number of points that older honors students usually score, and that said something about her mental capacity. In the spring of 2019, Carly's mom, Ashley, met a 45-year-old man named Heath Smiley, who worked as a physical therapist assistant. They immediately developed a romantic relationship and were married as early as June 2020. Unfortunately, I do not know how Carly took this news and what kind of person she really was. However, it was safe to say that despite her intelligence, she was interested in very controversial things such as physical aggression and edged weapons. Studying in the 7th grade, the girl first got into trouble for secretly bringing a Swiss knife to school. For this act, she was even sent to an alternative school for troubled teens. It is known that she studied there for about 6 months, and only after that, the management of her former school allowed her to go back. Although later she did change educational institution and continued her education at a high school located in the city of Brandon, the administrative center of Rankinstadt County, Mississippi. In fact, it was only a 10-minute drive from her home. Ironically, Carly's mother, Ashley, was a geometry teacher at the same school. If you thought that this was a plus for the girl and so she could get the attention and support she needed from her mother, it was far from it. In fact, Ashley and Carly had a complicated relationship, especially outside of school, so Carly had to go through a lot seeing her mom both at home and at school. And while she was still the smartest girl in her class, she was also the youngest. And the other teens took advantage of that and sometimes manipulated her. Specifically, they made Carly do their schoolwork, as well as help them with various projects. In other words, the girl was in extremely uncomfortable conditions. Because of her behavior, she had conflicts with her mother and stepfather time and time again. Once Carly was caught helping her classmates cheat on a test. That time, the girl got into the computer of her teacher and photographed all the answers, and then gave these answers to several classmates. In the end, as it often happens, all these answers ended up in the hands of other students, and when everything came to light, Carly was punished. And what happened became another reason for a serious quarrel with her mother. It is noteworthy that at this time Carly already had a young man. His name was Anthony, and since the young people were having contradictory conversations now and then, Carly's mom said that she should not date this boy anymore. And for a while they did break up, but eventually their close communication resumed. Then Ashley just decided to let it go. Perhaps she trusted her daughter, who knows? Nevertheless, it was reliably known that already at that time she exercised close parental control and sometimes looked through all of Carly's mobile devices, as well as set restrictions on the use of some applications. Specifically, the woman forbade her daughter from using apps, such as TikTok, and made Carly put her phone away whenever she went to bed. So before going to bed, the girl always left her phone in the kitchen or on her mother's night table. And it must be said that one of the main reasons why Ashley checked her daughter's phone was her sincere desire to resume communication with her biological father, whom her mother wanted to deprive of all parental rights. Ashley just didn't believe that Kevin could be a good role model for Carly, since he was still abusing alcohol and illegal substances and was generally a pretty abusive person. And when the woman found out that her daughter disregarded her inhibitions and started socializing with her father, she set up even more inhibitions and rules within the house. In fact, this only encouraged Carly to protest more. Although she was a smart, bright girl, it didn't save her from being influenced by her classmates, some of whom were around 15 years old at the time. It is no secret that this age is considered almost the most rebellious period in the life of any person, and many teenagers begin to do such things as the use of illegal substances and drinking alcoholic beverages. It is into this environment that young Carly finds herself, and in addition to her new and yet controversial hobbies, she also began to develop obvious mental health issues. Carly was, to put it mildly, not in the best mental state, and later, many of her classmates noted that at this time, she began to deliberately injure herself with a knife. Fortunately, Ashley found out about it in time and persuaded Carly to undergo therapy for anxiety and stress. However, she never followed through with it. Carly was later prescribed so-called antipsychotic medications, but they were later replaced with medications to treat symptoms of depressive or generalized anxiety disorder. Apparently, Carly was switched to this medication because specialists believed she had certain mental health problems that the antipsychotic medication was simply unable to deal with. And it's kind of hard for me to know if there was a connection, but Carly had switched to this drug just 5 days before her mom was attacked. The morning of that day was a typical morning. Ashley and Carly headed off to school as usual. Not long after they left, Heath also drove to work. People who saw Ashley and Carly that day said there was nothing unusual or strange about their behavior. According to them, they were completely normal with each other and did not show any aggression. After lunch, they returned home. At this time, Heath was still at work. Their after-school routine was pretty simple. When they returned home, Carly would usually go outside and walk her dogs, of which she had either 2 or 3. And while the girl was out of the house, Ashley would usually go into her room to make a quick inspection of her daughter's personal belongings. Except that this time the peculiar experience was due to the fact that Ashley had heard some information from one of the students, who was also Carly's close friend. This girl herself had approached Ashley and told her that she had been very worried about Carly lately, and the reason for this concern was that Carly started drinking and using illegal substances much more often. According to her friend, Carly literally couldn't imagine her life without pot. It was like she didn't know how to function without it. Therefore, she was scared for Carly, thinking that she had developed an addiction to illegal substances. Upon hearing this information, Ashley took the opportunity to go into her daughter's room as usual. After only a few moments, she discovered 4 smoking devices. Like any mother, when she saw this, she was more than a little scared for her daughter. Ashley obviously didn't want Carly, with such potential, to steer her life down the wrong path. And while the woman was thinking about what she should do, Carly managed to get home and then walk into her room to see her mom on her bed with vape in hand. And I have to say, the next part of this story was so frightening that I'm not even sure there was any conversation between the two of them at all. More likely, Carly just left her room and went to her mother's bedroom to retrieve the gun Ashley kept in her bedside table in case of uninvited guests or other emergencies. and when the girl returned to her room, she shot her mother 3 times in the face. After Carly shot her mother, she went to the kitchen to get her phone. She realized that now she should have gotten rid of her stepfather. So Carly texted him from Ashley's phone and asked him when he planned on coming home. After receiving a reply, the girl pulled out her phone and started texting her friends, talking about how she was freaking out about the emergency that had happened right outside her house. Considering the fact that most of Carly's friends were still teenagers, they simply didn't have the opportunity to get in the car and drive to her. So they just started asking her various questions about what really happened. However, Carly answered rather sparingly. According to some reports during the correspondence, one of the girl's friends even advised her to go to the police, but she only replied that she would not do that. In fact, only one of Carly's friends eventually reached out to her, and since she was still under the age of majority at the time, I won't give her real name. So when Carly called this girl and said she needed help, the girl immediately went to her father and asked for a ride to her friend's house. Once inside, the girl saw Carly standing in the middle of the living room playing with her dogs. Seeing such a picture, she was even a little confused, because what was happening was not like any emergency situation. And so it was until Carly said, quote, "You are not afraid of corpses." After that, the girl took her friend to her room and showed her her mother's corpse, which was still lying on the floor. She even showed her the gun, mentioning that it had originally contained as many as 6 bullets. Moreover, Carly stated that she had saved the 3 remaining bullets for her stepfather, who she said could come home at any second. Carly then told her friend that she could go out to the backyard and sit there for a while she dealt with Heath. The girl eventually took her advice and went outside. Afterward, many of those who investigated the case wondered why it happened that way and why she didn't try to run away. In my opinion, the main reason for this behavior was that the girl was the same age as Carly, and I believe that when she saw the body of the dead woman and her friend with a gun in her hands, she simply decided that it would be safer for her if she did only what she was told. The girl's own testimony was that a short time after she went outside, the sounds of gunshots rang out inside the house. Although it would be more accurate to say that only 1 shot was heard at first, accompanied by the screams of a man, and then 2 more. After a moment, the sounds of a struggle followed. Carly then ran out into the backyard and told her friend to run. The girls ended up jumping over the fence and running away. It is known that at this point they split up, and Carly's friend went back to her house, trying to get as far away from the area as possible. It's hard to say exactly what was going on inside the house. According to the story of Heath, Carly's stepfather, he barely had time to open the door before a gun was in his face. Fortunately, the first bullet only barely grazed his shoulder, and while he was fighting for his life and trying to wrestle the gun out of Carly's hands, several more shots rang out. True, none of those bullets ever hit Heath. And when the girl found out that she was out of ammunition, she simply let the weapon out of her hands and rushed away. According to Heath, at the time of the attack, Carly looked as if she had seen a demon. And importantly, the man didn't even immediately realize what had actually happened. He assumed that the house might have been broken into by a burglar, and supposedly that's why the girl grabbed the gun. What's more, he thought the alleged perpetrator might still be inside. It was only after Carly ran away that he decided to call the police and ask for help. And while the man was talking to the dispatcher, he also took a quick look around the house, trying to see if any intruders were still inside. That's when Heath discovered Ashley's body. It was still lying on the floor of Carly's room with a towel over her face. When the first police officers arrived on the scene, the man was lying in the living room, truly horrified by what he had seen. He only tried to explain to the police what Carly looked like and in what direction she could have run. After a brief conversation, Heath was taken to the hospital. Meanwhile, police officers who continued to look around the house discovered one of the surveillance cameras that had been installed in the garage It turned out to have captured the moment during which the girl attacked her stepfather. Carly was found shortly thereafter. She was simply walking along the side of the road about 2 miles from her home. During questioning by police officers, it became clear that Carly and her mother had quite a few problems. The girl's school friends revealed that she had repeatedly talked about her intention to commit murder. According to them, she never hid her sincere hatred for her mother and stepfather. Carly believed that Ashley was only making her life more difficult and depriving her of her freedom. A friend of Carly's who came to her home that day and saw her mother's body also went to the police station to tell her version of events. In addition, the police interviewed the biological father of the girl, and he stated that the main reason for such an act was the fact that Carly's stepfather was regularly tempting her to intimacy. However, he had no evidence to support his speculation. Sometime after her arrest, Carly reported that she began to hear voices. Allegedly, she had recently started having obsessive thoughts of a highly contradictory nature. Around the same time, the girl's lawyers tried to claim that she was insane, but only they could not confirm this hypothesis and provide any expert opinions. During the entire trial, they simply insisted on her innocence. However, the representatives of the prosecution showed all kinds of evidence indicating that Carly really committed these crimes. Heath, who was also present in the courtroom, described how he found the body of his spouse. According to him, he ran up to Ashley to check her pulse and then removed the towel from her face and realized she was dead. One of Carly's close friends also appeared in the courtroom to testify. This was the same girl who approached Ashley and told her of her concern about Carly's behavior. In her opinion, she was going through a bad time. It seemed to her as if Carly had chosen the wrong path. However, whenever she tried to talk to her about it, it ended in a major fight. This is why she decided to turn to her mother, believing it was the most appropriate course of action. In the end, with all the evidence, testimony, and a number of video camera recordings, the jury decided and sentenced Carly Gregg to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Carly Madison Gregg was actually sentenced to life in prison for murder and for attempted murder, as well as another 10 years for tampering with evidence. Her attorneys tried to get a life sentence with the possibility of parole, but that attempt was never successful, and that was the end of Carly Gregg's case.